welcome to Edison Open House Global Healthcare 2021. In this session, we're going to showcase the work of LocateBio. It's a company that develops orthobiologics. Now, these are used by orthopaedic surgeons to repair bone for those people who have chronic and often life-limiting degenerative bone conditions. I'm delighted to be joined by their CEO, John van Benecke. John, hello.
Hi. Very, very pleased to have the opportunity to share a little bit about our story with you.
So this is a hugely exciting development in regenerative medicine. Can you just explain, first of all, what the conditions are that you're trying to address?
Yeah, orthobiologics as an area is a fascinating area of research. I'm very, very excited to be part of that area of regenerative medicine and tissue engineering. And it covers a very broad range of areas. The definition I like the most is that orthobiologics are any material used by an orthopedic surgeon, which will either speed up the repair or improve the repair of a musculoskeletal system. So that could be anything from tendons to ligaments to bone or cartilage or even muscle. So that as an umbrella is orthobiologics. It's an area that's progressed a long way, and you could argue that it's probably been in existence for as long as humans have walked the earth. Whenever somebody becomes injured, they would like to return state that they were before the injury, and restore the loss of function that they've suffered. And people have always been prepared to use quite novel materials in attempting to restore that function. And there's a wonderful TED talk given ago by Professor Molly Stevens, and she talks about how archaeologists have discovered that the Mayans used to use these wonderful blue nacre shells as tooth replacements. And there's something around the chemistry of those shells, and they're also hard, so similar to teeth, but they could integrate into jaw bones. So that shows that people have been prepared to do that a long time, and obviously the science has moved on a long way. That's the really exciting thing. We're able to now address conditions that until quite recently, those patients had very, very poor outcomes for. We have a product that we're developing for osteomyelitis as an example, and there's another one that we have for chronic back pain in spine. But if I just touch on the osteomyelitis for a moment, that is a devastating illness. I mean, bone is very good at resisting infection, but once an infection sets in, bone is actually very, very poor at counteracting infection. And what happens when you get an infection within the bone, it destroys the blood supply to that tissue, and bone is a living tissue, and that tissue then starts to die. So for those patients, it can go for 10 years with this constant pain in the bone, periods where they get swollen legs around the site. And the ability to relieve those patients and allow them to restore more of their usual daily life is sort of what gets us up every single morning to try to progress these products through to the market.
And indeed, some of these poor people in the end up having amputations simply because there's nothing more that can be done for them. So there's a big unmet medical need there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think sort of diabetic foot ulcers, I mean, we're seeing a significant in the number of diabetics in the world, particularly in emerging markets. And diabetic foot ulcers, when they progress through the soft tissue into bone, is where you get that infection. And that often leads to amputations at the moment. We also see infections because of open fractures, particularly of the lower leg. And I mean, it's horrific. Something like 6.6% of people who have a very complex open fracture of the lower leg will ultimately have an amputation, and that is horrific for them. It's very, very costly to the healthcare system, and these are certainly patients that deserve our very best attention.
So, very important area. Tell me why your products have got the potential to disrupt the market so profoundly here.
I think there's two necessary ingredients to be able to bring better orthobiologics choices and give those to surgeons so that they can, improve the lives of patients. And I would say that the two necessary things are the things that we certainly think are significant advantages and allows us to capitalize on is that we are a pure play orthobiologics company. So that means that we have a very deep domain expertise in the science. We understand the market very well. We understand the gaps within the market very, very well. And because we're a young, very ambitious company, we're able to perhaps challenge the status quo more than the big companies can, who are constantly chasing the next revenue target. And we combine that with the very best of science. So we partner not only with the University of Nottingham, from which LocateBio was originally a spin-out, but we also partner with other leading European research academic groups. And we take that very, very good, high-quality science that is very comprehensively understood, and we can marry that with our, deep understanding of the marketplace to bring products that address those unmet needs within the market. So I think it's really that combination of our ability to understand the market very, very well as a pure play specialist company trying to build a world-leading diversified orthobiologics business, and really, really good science. And there is no substitute for that science. And then what we do is exercise our core competency to perfect the product market fit and drive through the various developments and regulatory milestones to bring those products to the benefit of patients.
Let's just go through your various products. And I want you to tell me about the very exciting news that you've had on them. Look at that smile on his face.
Yeah, so we'll come to the very exciting news at the end. I'll run through the other. There's 4 products that we are progressing aggressively through our development timelines at the moment. The first is a product called Certos. That is a tissue scaffold. It's a new class of tissue scaffold, which was developed by the Royal Surgeons in Ireland. If I just go back to very, very basics just for a second, which is, stem cells, when they're the natural healing blocks of the body, and they have to sense their environment to determine what it is that they should become. And they do that through ligament attachment and everything else. And there's a new class of materials which has progressed from initially in this area products with bioinerts. They formed a physical function, but it was selected because they didn't have a biological response. And plaster of Paris was first used in 1892 as a bone graft filler, and science has moved on a long way. We then went through a phase when I was at Tech, which is another startup in the UK, spin out from Queen Mary College, that did very, very well. We found that substitute ions could speed up that healing. So back to that principle of what orthopedic surgeons would like. I move to these instructive materials. So if you can imagine, if I asked you to select 3 members of your family that you knew very well, and I put you all into a very, very dark room and blindfolded you, and I said, could you identify which they were? You'd probably use your hands to touch their face and their hair, and from that you would be able to identify that they are. And that's exactly how stem cells react when they become attached to a tissue scaffold. They sense the stiffness of the scaffold, and they sense the pore size that they're against, and they sense whether they're on a curve or on a flat, and the materials that are in that tissue scaffold. And from that, they're able to determine what they should, what tissue type they should become. So Certos is really a platform technology for us, and has been shown to be able to produce bone at non-bony sites, which is the yardstick measure of a next generation bone graft, the ability to form bone where bone wouldn't otherwise have thought to form, if you like. That product is then also used in our second product, which is for cartilage repair. I mean, cartilage, when it becomes injured, can't self-repair. There are no pain receptors in cartilage. So if you feel pain, it's likely to involve the underlying bone. This is a single plug that not only repairs the underlying bone, but also grows hyaline cartilage across the top. And that's the right type of thing. And that's all done through this mechanicobiology tissue scaffold, where we change the pore size, change the stiffness. So that's a cartilage repair product. We also have a biologic, which uses a molecule called BMP2. That was first discovered in the 1960s, and that's used to treat patients who have a devastating disease called degenerative disc disease. They lose disc height, so the discs are the shock absorbers of your spine. They start to lose their fluid content. The disc becomes compressed. That puts additional pressure onto the fat joints, which are the little bones at the back of your spine. Can lead to arthritis of those joints, but also presses onto the nerves coming out of your spine. And in those patients, it starts out as a perhaps they can't play golf anymore, and then it progresses that perhaps they can't even work anymore because of the excruciating pain that they're in, and ultimately they have to go for spinal surgery. So this product would be used to relieve those patients of spinal surgery. Typically what they do is put a disc in to restore the height and then form a bony fusion through it. And the really exciting news that you mentioned is our use of the Certos product, but to load that with antibiotics for the treatment of osteomyelitis. So the current standard of care stage procedure where they put a bone cement in loaded with antibiotic to try to eliminate the infection. Bone cement isn't reabsorbed, whereas our product is. It has a slightly clunky release profile of antibiotics, whereas ours is a dual phasic release, in that we release some of the antibiotic in the first few days to clear the infection, and we have the sentinel background release of antibiotics, which is responsive to infection. So for a lot of those patients, there's a significant risk of reinfection occurring, and our antibiotic product can actually release a second bolus of antibiotics should it sense reinfection, a risk of reinfection of the graft. And that product has just been awarded a breakthrough device designation by the FDA. That's a fantastic achievement. It's a recognition by the FDA that the technology represents a step change or potential step change in treatment over the available treatments that are in the market today.
That's really wonderful news. Just give us a sense, though, of how long the development of a product like this has taken, because this is not just overnight discovery.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's a fantastic question because it's so relevant to the race for a COVID vaccine that we've recently seen. None of it happened overnight, even though they appear to happen overnight. So if I take our most complex product and use that as one bookend, and I'll give an example of our simplest product as the other bookend to give you a range. So BMP as a molecule was discovered back in the 1960s. So if I ignore all the work done by all the leading scientists, and we genuinely are standing on the shoulders of giants in this industry, if you ignore all of that work, from the initiation of our project through to regulatory approval is probably a 10 to 12 year process of hard work all the way through that. And we're maybe 40% of the way through that timeline at the moment. But that's a particularly complex product because it is a biologic and a bone graft together. On the other extreme, for our products that again have relied on prior research done at the Royal College of Surgeons and our own understanding on orthobiologics, we can probably transition from concept to revenues for those products within 2 to 3 years. So it's a much shorter cycle simply because they don't contain a drug or don't contain a biologic and are just scaffolds.
So those are the timelines in development. Tell me about the timelines over the next, say, 6 to 12 months that perhaps investors should be keeping an eye out for.
We've had a fantastic start to this year already. In January, we made 2 significant press releases. First was the addition of Keith Valentine as the new chair of our board. So Keith has 30 years of relevant experience in this market. He was chief operating officer of a company called Nuvasive and instrumental in growing that company to the billion-dollar revenue company it is today. He's currently the chief executive of C-Spine, which is a company, a large US spinal company that's taking market share and growing very, very quickly. So we're delighted to have him join our board. And the second press release that we also announced in January of this year was that the breakthrough device designation. So great start to the year. For other things that investors should expect from us, we will be closing a funding round in the coming months, which will allow us to drive through all 4 of those programs that we've mentioned to significant value inflection points, either a 510K clearance for the Certos, or the first product from the first Certos family, which will give us approval to commercialize that. And for the other 3 products, which will all require clinical studies, to drive through to the data packages that we will need to engage with the FDA to allow us to commence those human clinical studies. So that's what we will be focused on, sort of heads down on for the rest of this year. And you may well see some additional business development activities in the second half of this year as well.
Well, that's interesting you should say that, because you joined as CEO 10 months ago. I'm not sure whether that means you joined pre or post the beginning of lockdown in the UK, which may mean that you've never actually physically met quite a lot of your employees. But anyway, one of your very first actions was to in-license additional technologies. Tell me a bit more about that.
So I have a very clear of where the company is going, that we are looking to build a world-leading diversified orthobiologics business. And I have a very clear picture in mind of what that business needs to look like by the end of this decade. And this was a very clear step on our journey to building that business. The acquisition from the technologies from the Royal College of Surgeons, they're a fantastic research group. They're one of Europe's leading tissue engineering groups. They've done many, many years of research on this particular scaffold in a number of different applications. So we're taking very well-formed, very coherent science. It gives us a very powerful platform which complements our own platform, which was originally a spin-out from the University of Nottingham. So now we have this osteoinductive scaffold where we can take these stem cells and we can, by changing the they're experiencing, direct them to different cell fates. And we also have a very novel polymer-based technology that also has a very broad application. We can tune it for soft tissue or hard tissue, so both bone and soft tissues, and allows us to control the release of drugs, biologics, and even stem cells, and gives us a lot of applications within musculoskeletal repair. So now we have two very, very powerful platforms. There's the intriguing possibility of what we might be able to do by merging the best of both, and what future problems or unmet needs we can address as well.
What about partnership opportunities? Are you looking to distribute your products yourselves or through a partner, or how are you doing that?
So at the moment, we are very much research focused, and that is where most of the employees in the organization are focused. We will begin looking for commercial partners. The US is our primary focus market at the moment. It's the largest orthobiologics market that there is. But all of the studies, the 3 clinical studies that we're doing, should give us regulatory approval both in the US and in Europe by making them global studies. So the European requirements are slightly fewer patients in those clinical studies, so we may see slightly earlier approvals in Europe than we do for the US. And as those clinical studies start to report, we'll begin to engage with commercial partners to bring these products to the market.
How much cash runway do you have?
Yeah, so we're very well supported by Mercia, who are a large regional fund at the moment. We've also taken previous investment from the Wellcome Trust and Heraeus Medical, who are a German on a co-development program we had with them. We're looking at $12 and $13 million in the next few months, and that will fund us through to those 4 value-enhancing milestones. So either the 510(k) clearance or approval to begin those clinical studies, and then we'll again look for and beyond that.
John, this is an extraordinary technology, and it has the potential, as you say, to be very disruptive. I've watched it grow over many years, and I wish you all the best in this very exciting year for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.